KDE is not just a desktop environment, it's one of the longest running and most ambitious adventures in modern open source. And like all great stories, it begins with frustration. It's 1996. The internet is still young, Windows 95 has transformed how people see personal computers, and Linux, well, Linux is powerful, fascinating, but anything but user-friendly. Matthias Ettrich, a German computer science student at the University of Tübingen, is tired of the chaotic interface he faces every time he boots up Linux. Every program looks different, there's no consistency, and absolutely nothing comes close to the user experience of Windows or Mac OS. One day, he writes a message to a mailing list, proposing the creation of a desktop environment that's consistent, beautiful, and above all, easy to use. He calls it KDE, Kool Desktop Environment. Kool with a K, because in the 90s, everything was cooler with a K. Matthias and 15 other brave developers gathered for the first time in Arnsberg, Germany in 1997 to give structure to the project and define its roadmap. That meeting is now known as KDE 1. After that event, the same year, two major initiatives followed. The founding of KDE EV, the nonprofit that represents the KDE community financially. Matthias's choice to build KDE using a graphical toolkit called Qt, developed by a Norwegian company named Trolltech, was controversial. It was powerful, elegant, and allowed for the rapid creation of modern interfaces. But there was a catch. Qt's license wasn't fully open source. This sparked intense debate in the community. Some accused Ettrich of betraying the free spirit of Linux. From that conflict, another project would be born, GNOME, a fully free and open alternative from day one. But KDE pressed on and created the KDE Free Qt Foundation. The foundation agreement was signed by KDE EV and Trolltech, then the owner of Qt, to ensure that Qt would always remain available as free software. The first stable release, KDE 1.0, came out in 1998 and was a revolution. Finally, Linux had a face, a modern interface, visual consistency, and for the first time, a Windows user could feel at home. A true desktop environment, complete with an office suite and all the essential tools one would expect at the time. Distributions began adopting KDE SUSE, Mandrake, Caldera. Konqueror became the flagship browser and file manager, lightweight, powerful, and the first in the world to offer decent support for JavaScript and CSS. Few people know that in the early 2000s, Apple used Konqueror's rendering engine, KHTML, as the base for WebKit, the engine behind Safari. KDE quietly had just changed the history of the web. At the time, key figures leading KDE's technical development included David Farr and Sebastian Kugler, alongside Ettrich. In 2000, KDE 2.0 was released, and it marked a major leap forward. Following the success of KDE 1.0, which finally gave Linux a face, KDE 2 was the technical and architectural response to a desktop ready to grow, become professional, and face the future. This release introduced key technologies that would become KDE's foundation for years to come. DCOP, Desktop Communication Protocol, a lightweight and powerful system that allowed applications to communicate with each other, well before dbus existed. KIO, KDE Input-Output, one of the most underrated yet revolutionary innovations. Thanks to KIO, any KDE application could access remote resources as if they were local. No need for external plugins, just type ftplash or SMB in the address bar. Files on servers, Windows networks, SSH, it was all integrated. KHTML, the web rendering engine used by Konqueror, supported CSS and JavaScript effectively on Linux. It would later become the base for Apple's WebKit, used in Safari and Chrome. Kparts allowed components of one app to be embedded into another. For example, viewing a text document inside a browser or using a PDF viewer inside the file manager. A pioneering idea for the time. KDE 2.x wasn't perfect yet, but it became usable for real work. More importantly, it represented a unified vision. All applications shared design, functionality, and behavior. It was the first step toward KDE as a consistent platform rather than a collection of isolated apps. It was also the time when KDE's visual identity began to take shape. Until KDE 2.x, the desktop mascot was Gandalf the Wizard. However, the KDE Assistant introduced in version 2 featured a new character, Conky, a little green dragon who was so beloved that starting with KDE 3.x, he became the official mascot of the project and still is today. The KDE 3.x series, released starting in 2002, didn't bring major architectural overhauls like KDE 2.x, but instead focused on three key goals: refining and stabilizing the technologies introduced in KDE 2, DCOP, KIO, KParts, KHTML, making the environment more reliable and mature for daily use, and expanding KDE's features and application ecosystem. Many distributions and users adopted it. It was fully modular, feature-rich, and far more stable than one would expect from a Linux graphical environment in the early 2000s. For many users, it was the first time Linux offered an experience that didn't make them miss Windows 2000 or XP. In some ways, it was even more flexible. One of KDE 3's strengths was Conqueror, which acted as a web browser, file manager, FTP client, and even a PDF reader through plugins. It was all integrated, and KIO allowed access to remote resources as if they were local using URLs. KDE 3 applications used KParts, which let users embed components from one application inside another, like a document inside a browser or a video player in the file manager. It was a powerful early form of modularity. The most beloved version was probably KDE 3.5, released in 2005. Fast, stable, highly customizable, and backed by a mature suite of applications, it remained in use for years, even after the release of KDE 4. So much so that forks like Trinity Desktop Environment were created to preserve its legacy. After more than 8 years of development, KDE had become a mature project, but its architectural limitations were becoming increasingly evident. To move forward, the community made a bold decision to rewrite the desktop environment almost entirely from scratch using the new Qt libraries. This new version would be highly innovative, not overthrowing the desktop metaphor, but evolving it into something with previously unthinkable flexibility and scalability. KDE 4 introduced Plasma as the new desktop shell, Akonadi for managing personal data like contacts and email, and Nepomuk for the so-called semantic desktop. The chosen visual language, Oxygen, was modern and beautiful. Nuno Pinheiro, the lead artwork designer, shared previews of icons and wallpapers on his blog, which were immediately praised. The final wallpaper for KDE 4 was selected through a public contest, and the included designs were stunning. Sebastian Kugler, the lead developer of Plasma, and Aaron Saigo were also key figures during this era. But it was ambitious, too ambitious. The early versions were unstable, slow, and often frustrating. The user base split. Some remained loyal to KDE 3, others moved to GNOME, and many turned to simpler desktop environments. It was one of the most difficult periods in KDE's history. But the project didn't give up. With Plasma 5, KDE reinvented itself. Cleaner code, modular architecture, new libraries, and a modern, fast UI. Qt 5 became the foundation, and KDE began to shine again. The community regrouped, and even old contributors returned. Each release brought real improvements: lower RAM usage, faster startup times, smoother animations. With Plasma 6, released in 2024, KDE reached a new level: full Wayland support, refined animations, advanced features for high refresh rate monitors, and vastly improved power management. It might be the most mature and coherent version ever. But KDE is not just technology. It's a community, a global network of developers, designers, translators, enthusiasts, and students. KDE EFE, the nonprofit organization that supports the project, doesn't dictate rules. Decisions are made openly through mailing lists, conferences, and discussions. Anyone, anywhere in the world can join and contribute meaningfully. It's a distributed, almost anarchic governance model, and yet it works. Maybe that's exactly why KDE is still around after nearly 30 years. There's an unofficial but beloved saying in the KDE community: if GNOME is the iPhone, KDE is Android with root access. It's a joke, but it says a lot. GNOME aims for extreme simplicity and a controlled, uniform experience. KDE, on the other hand, embraces diversity, freedom, and the ability to customize every last detail. Want to move the panel to the top, change every icon, use animated wallpapers, or have 6 virtual desktops with different rules? KDE says yes, and if you mess it up, you can always reset. The KDE ecosystem is massive. Few realize that KDE isn't just a desktop, but also dozens of professional-grade applications. Dolphin, the powerful yet intuitive file manager. Okular, a PDF viewer many consider superior to Evince or Adobe Reader. KDenLive, one of the best open-source nonlinear video editors. Krita, a digital painting app beloved by illustrators and comic artists. Console, Kate Gwenview. Each app serves a purpose, but also shares a consistent design. And every year with the KDE Gear release, the entire suite is updated in sync, a sign of strong and lasting planning. KDE Neon is the distribution that best embodies this vision, based on Ubuntu LTS for stability, but always running the latest versions of Plasma and KDE apps. It's fast, lightweight, and modern, ideal for anyone who wants KDE as their daily driver without compromises. In recent years, KDE has started looking beyond the desktop. KDE Connect bridges the gap between PC and smartphone, an essential tool for many Android users. Plasma Mobile dares to challenge Android and iOS on their own turf, offering a free and open alternative where every app is a choice, not a mandate. KDE collaborates with companies like Pine64, Framework, and Valve. It's in the Steam Deck, it runs on ARM devices, and it's starting to appear in industrial and educational environments. This isn't just about tech, it's about an idea. In a world where computing is increasingly closed, centralized, and monetized, KDE remains a stronghold of freedom. It's not perfect, and it doesn't pretend to be, but it's transparent, adaptable, human, a project that places the user at the center, not as a consumer, but as a participant. If we can still choose how we want to use our computers today, KDE is one of the main reasons that choice exists. And perhaps that's the most important part of its story, because KDE isn't finished, it's just getting started. Thank you for watching.